this week's episode of The Mind Advantage, I wanted to build on a conversation that I had this week for my podcast. So you might be aware that I have a podcast on Spotify and all the various other channels, which is called The Locker Room. And this week, I think it's episode 206, we were talking about what are some of the key ways that we can nourish ourselves in addition to sleep. We all know how important sleep is, but are there other ways that we can be looking after ourselves? And this could be particularly helpful for those times in life when we might actually be getting sufficient sleep, but we still feel tired or fatigued, or the aspects of our lives aren't fully functioning the way that we would want them to. So some of this work and this conversations builds on the work that was done by Dr. Sandra Dalton-Smith. She had a very popular TED talk on this topic, and many people talk to the other different types of rest that we can have. So I thought it was a good one for us to dig into today. So we'll get straight into them because there are 7 of them. So the first one is physical rest. So giving yourself a break from physical activities. Sleep is obviously a physical activity, but in addition to that, what else can you be doing to give yourself additional rest? So that might be things like resting or napping, so light sleeping, but it could also be some less physical activities that help us to look after our bodies and give them some rest and recovery. So that could be activities like yoga or Pilates, some of those, although I know certainly when I do Pilates, that's a very physical thing for me to do, but there are certainly more passive recovery-based aspects of those, but stretching, massage therapy, a lot of those factors. So have a think about what are some of the ways that you can physically add rest into your body and look after yourself, and giving, your body that time to repair and to recover. In addition to the physical rest, we also have mental rest. And this is really helpful if we have a life that is full of focus and productivity and getting things done and problem solving. And we know that when we don't get enough mental rest, we can become irritable, we can become dissatisfied with what's going on, we can become forgetful, we can struggle to concentrate. There's a whole range of factors when we don't get sufficient rest for ourselves mentally. Some people think you need to plow on and keep going, but we do actually know that giving yourself time to rebound, recover, and have some of that rest is really important, because it actually helps to fuel your creativity and to make you feel more in tune with those concentration aspects that are so important for us. So scheduling breaks through the day might be a way of doing it. It might be about changing out to another activity that you might find interesting and restful but not too taxing on yourself mentally. It might be about organising yourself in terms of having a list or a timetable or a structure around what you're doing, but being really mindful that, spending an hour doing one activity might have a very different mental load on yourself than spending an hour doing something different. So don't necessarily equate your output to the number of hours or minutes that you spend on something. Just be, you want to be constantly monitoring, how am I going, and do I need a break here? Because often what we'll find is when you take a break, even if it's a short break, going down to get a cup of tea or a drink of water or stepping outside into the fresh air, any of those sorts of things can be really helpful for us in terms of our mental rest. We know, of course, that emotional rest is a really important area for us in terms of the fatiguing effects. We know that emotions burn up a lot of energy for us, and if we don't acknowledge and address our emotions, if we try and suppress them, then what we actually do is we just build up stress for ourselves. Now, how can you have emotional rest? Now, you might think, well, how do I switch off the emotions? Sometimes it's not about switching off the emotions. In fact, it's the opposite. It's acknowledging them. So if you're feeling a bit frustrated or annoyed, maybe you could do some journaling about that. Maybe you could talk to a trusted friend about that who's prepared to spend some time with you listening to you about it. You might engage in some therapy. You might listen to some music. You might, again, take yourself outside. Going outside actually offers us so much in so many different areas. So we know having some emotional rest is really important for us, because even though it doesn't involve a lot of physical activity, it certainly takes a lot of energy from us and from our reserves. We also know that creative rest is really important. What do we mean by that? So people might think, well, do I need to be stepping away, from some of the creative activities? Maybe it depends on what your creative activities are, and if your creative activities, 10 hours sitting at an easel or something like that, then maybe you do need to be taking breaks from that. But we also know that many of the things that we do as part of our day-to-day, and particularly in workplaces, if you're someone who's heavily involved in leadership and problem solving is a really creative task. We don't always think of it as being creative, but giving ourselves breaks from that. So maybe it might be about monitoring our workflow so that we're not always, engaged in those high thinking, higher cognitive activities. So having a bit of a break there could be really helpful for us as well. Sensory rest. Now, I'm a big fan of this one. So sensory rest literally refers to the rest we give ourselves through our senses. So we know that light can have a draining effect on us, whether it's too bright or whether it's too dark. We also know that noise is a significant potential stressor for us. We know that stimulation is also something that can be draining for us. So finding opportunities to give ourselves a break from the senses. So it might be about taking yourself out of the open plan office and maybe either, if it's appropriate in your workplace, popping some headphones in, going to a quiet room, going to another location. Maybe you can set up work somewhere else. So taking yourself away from some of that stimulation can be a really helpful thing for you in terms of reducing the sensory load that the world often has on us. You might have noticed with some of the shopping centres, they now will advertise low sensory hours for shopping, which means that if you are someone who does get a bit overstimulated or you just want a little bit of quiet, you can go to the shopping centre on those days. I don't think they play music at all, or it's certainly very, non-intrusive, but they also slightly dim the light so that it's not quite so bright. So for those people that have sensory challenges, that can be really good. But we do know that wherever we can provide ourselves with that break, it can be little things like I noticed last week I was driving to deliver a workshop, and I got there, it was a 20-minute drive, and I realised when I got there I hadn't turned the radio on. I had no music, no stimulation, and so that was really helpful as well. The next type of rest for us to consider is social rest. Do you need to step away from some of the humans? So we know that whilst our social relationships can certainly recharge us, they also can drain from us as well. So making sure that we're maintaining healthy boundaries with our relationships and having those connections with people is really important. Sometimes you might find leaning into your social networks might actually reinvigorate you, and other times you might find that you need some solo time or less people in your space. So monitoring and working out what's going to be best for you there, and also how you spend your time in relation to social media, hobbies, things that you do by yourself. All of those sorts of factors make a difference. And the last one, number 7, is spiritual rest. Now, what do we mean by this? This is one of those points where it's not about reducing the exposure to it, but actually increasing it. So spiritual rest can mean a range of different things. It broadly means connecting with something bigger than yourself. Now, for some people, that might be through religion. So someone might have a religious faith that when they spend time thinking about that, reading in that area, spending time going to places that symbolise their religion, that might give them that sense of peace and that sense of rest. And for others, it might be about those things that make sense to us and I guess help us get a bit of perspective about how we fit into the world. So that might be, it might be through meditation, it might be about your environment. Sometimes for some people going to a lovely beach or a rainforest, those sorts of spaces can give you a sense of a bigger sense of purpose. But again, that is something that has meaning for many people. So what we know with the 7 different types of rest is that when we build some of these into our lives, part of our regular, every day, every week, every month, and how we spend our time, it helps bring a bit of energy back into us. We spend so much time sending our energy out. This is a way to bring our energy in. And, whether you're getting enough sleep or not, these are certainly not meant to replace sleep, but definitely they are things that when we do them, they can definitely improve our well-being, our health, and our general sense of purpose. So hopefully you found some of that interesting. You'll see some of the other episodes that we've got there in the YouTube channel or in the Facebook group, and would encourage you to subscribe if you'd like to see more of these videos, which we put up every week. So hopefully you're finding them helpful, and always happy to hear from you if there's a particular topic that you'd like me to cover.